Hello, Vimman75 here. In this example, I'm going to show you how to set up a game of life system. So we're going to start off by creating the nodes that we need. So we need a game of life draw node, need a game of life grid, and we also need a game of life step. We will also need a frame node and a Boolean node to reset the simulation. I'm going to bring up the visualizer, and now we can begin to connect our nodes together. So what we're going to do now is we're going to plug the grid into the step node, and we're going to plug the game of life step node into the visualizer. And you can see that we can see the game of life grid appear in the visualizer. I'm going to go ahead and pin the game of life draw color node, so that way I can freely select other nodes. And I'm going to plug my frame node into the step node, and I'm also going to plug my Boolean node into the game of life step to reset the simulation. I can play it back and you'll see that I'm getting something. At the moment the grid is quite small, so I'm going to double click the grid, and in the node editor I'm going to make a few changes. I can change these values internally inside of the node editor, or I could add some nodes to control that, to override these values. But in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and make the changes directly inside of the node. So I'm going to make it a bit bigger, so 512 by 512. And I'll need to reset this before I can see the update. I'm just going to press frame inside of here. The next thing I'm going to do is I want to set up some of the rules, because when I play it, I might not be happy with these rules, so I'm going to set up some other rules. So I'm just going to stop that, and I'm just going to double click the step node, and I'm just going to change some of the rules. So I'm going to change the birth rules to 33, and I'm just going to change the survival rules to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In order to see any of these changes, I again will need to reset the step node, and I can play through this now and see that I'm getting something. It's a bit fast, so let's just go and investigate why that is happening. So I'm going to go back to the grid node, and I'm going to change the seed, which is the pattern, to maybe 4, and just drop down the density quite a lot, to 0.01, and I'll just reset that. Okay, and we'll play through. Okay, so now I'm getting something a little bit more interesting with the growth patterns. So you can see that's looking a little bit more interesting. Okay, I'm just going to stop that, and just to make it look a little bit more interesting again, I'm going to add in some color. So I'm going to add in a color constant for the background, or the dead color. So I'll leave that. I might just make that like a ready kind of tissue. So I'll call that dead color. And you can see that on the game of life draw color node, I have an alive and dead input. So I'm just going to plug this into the dead. You can see that that updates, and I might just duplicate the constant here by pressing Control D and making this the alive color. And I'll just go ahead and maybe make this a different color. Let's just change it to a pink. And I'll plug this into the alive, and now you can see that we've got something. So we can play with those colors. If we're not happy with that, I could maybe change that to something a bit different. Not enough contrast there. Let me just, there we go. And so now I can continue to play and see that pattern. And of course I can change the rules at any time to give me different patterns. Now one more thing that I might do is, because the way that it's set up, even though when it gets to the end of the 100 frames in this case, which I can change, it won't reset the sim. It will just continue to play, which is, I guess, a good thing. But if for some reason I do want it to reset, I'm going to have to probably add a keyframe. Oh, there's many ways to do it, but the easiest way would be to add a keyframe to the bool node. I might rename that and call it reset. So I'm just going to go back to the first frame, and I'm going to bring up the keyframe sequencer, and I'll make sure I'm on frame 1, and I'm just going to right click on the bool node, click animation, and I'm going to animate this value by clicking animate value bool. By default, it would have added a key on frame 1 and the value is true. I actually want to make this false, and then I want to go 1 frame forward to 2, and I want to set this to true, and I just want to now on frame 2, you can see I just want to click set key. So what this is going to do is it's going to, on frame 1 it will be set to false, and on frame 2 it will be set to true. Because this is a Boolean, I'm also going to change the interpolation to linear. And there we go. So now what will happen is I'll just lower this to, let's say, 50. When I play it back, you can see that I get my growth pattern, but this time when it gets to 50, it will reset. So I'm going to increase this to maybe 1,000 frames and just rewind it. And we can go ahead and just play that back. So that's essentially the process of adding a game of life simulation to Noded. I could also, if I wanted to, export this out, the sequence. So if I wanted to do that, I could create an export image sequence. I could plug that in. And then I could click on the browse button, go to where I might have some sequences. I might make I could make a folder here, or I could just put the files in this location, and I could click save, and then I would click the export button. And that's going to create 1,000 frames in this case. If I click export, it will pop up and begin to generate those frames, which will be PNGs. I'm just going to stop that. But essentially, then I could play that back in some flipbook or import that into something like Premiere or some other editing software. Okay, that's the end of this video. Thanks.